The Galactic Naval Academy sat on Station Prometheus like a metal city floating in the black ocean of space. Every year, thousands of young people from 12 different star systems tried to join. Only 300 made it through. These were the best of the best. The future commanders. The heroes who would protect the galaxy. Kim Yuna stood in line with the other new cadets. She was 22 years old, small in height, and quiet in nature. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform was clean and pressed. She looked like any other cadet, except for one thing. On her belt, she carried a sword, not a plasma blade, not a molecular cutter, not any of the high-tech weapons that the other cadets wore with pride. Yuna carried a curved steel sword in an old leather case. The leather was cracked and worn from age. The metal handle showed marks from many hands that had held it before her dot. This sword was called a jingam. It was a traditional Korean blade, forged on Earth over 400 years ago. Yuna's grandfather had given it to her mother. Her mother had given it to her. Before that, it had passed through 8 generations of her family. The sword had seen wars. It had seen peace. It had protected her ancestors through times of great danger. Now it hung at the hip of a small girl standing in a space station millions of miles from Earth. The equipment inspection took place in Hangar Bay 7. The space was huge, big enough to hold several starships. Today, it held 300 cadets standing in neat rows while instructors walked between them. Checking their gear, Bradley Mitchell stood 3 rows ahead of Yuna. He was tall, blonde, and handsome in the way that people with money often are. His father was Admiral Mitchell. His grandfather had been Admiral Mitchell. His great-grandfather had commanded the fleet that first made contact with alien life. Bradley had grown up knowing he was special. Everyone told him so. He carried the newest plasma pistol on his belt. It cost more than most families earned in a year. The weapon could burn through 3 inches of steel in 2 seconds. Bradley had never needed to use it for real, but he loved showing it off. When he turned and saw Yuna's sword, he laughed out loud. The sound was sharp and mean. It cut through the quiet of the hangar like a knife. Other cadets turned to look. Bradley walked toward Yuna with a big smile on his face. "What is that?" he asked, pointing at her belt. "Did you bring a toy?" Yuna did not answer. She kept her eyes forward and her face calm. Bradley got closer. He could see the old leather now, the simple metal, the complete lack of any technology. His smile got wider. "Hey, everyone," he called out. "Come look at this." Earth Girl brought a museum piece to space. Other cadets gathered around. Some laughed. Some just stared with curious eyes. A few looked uncomfortable, but nobody spoke up against Bradley. His family was too powerful. His father could end careers with a single word. "Is that real steel?" asked one cadet, a girl named Jessica Powell. She seemed more curious than mean. "It looks ancient," said another. "It is ancient," Bradley said. "What's wrong, Earth Girl? Couldn't afford a real weapon? Did you have to raid your grandmother's attic?" Yuna's fingers touched the handle of the sword. Just a light touch, like saying hello to an old friend. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "This blade belonged to my ancestors," she said. "It has never failed them." Bradley laughed again. This time, it was louder and crueler. "Your ancestors didn't fight aliens with armor that stops plasma bolts," he said. "Your ancestors didn't face creatures that can tear through metal like paper. What's your butter knife going to do against something like that?" "I do not know," Yuna said honestly. "But the blade will show me when the time comes." This answer made Bradley laugh even harder. He turned to his friends and shook his head. "She's crazy," he said. "Absolutely crazy. This is what happens when you let primitive planets send cadets to the academy. They show up with kitchen knives and fairy tales. The other cadets laughed with him. It was easier to laugh with Bradley than to stand against him. Una stood alone in a circle of mocking faces, but her expression did not change. She had heard worse. She had faced worse. Instructor Park Do-hyun watched from the doorway of the hangar. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. He wore the medals of a decorated soldier on his chest. 20 years of service. 15 combat missions. 3 times he had almost died for the fleet. He saw what was happening to Una. He saw Bradley's cruelty and the other cadets' cowardice. But he did not step in. He did not stop it. Instead, he looked at the sword on Una's belt, and something strange passed over his face. Recognition, memory, pain. He knew that blade. He had seen it before, a long time ago, in the hands of another soldier. A soldier who had saved his life. Park said nothing. Tomorrow, the cadets would drop onto Kepler-7 for their survival exercise. Tomorrow, they would face real danger. Tomorrow, Bradley Mitchell would learn a lesson that no classroom could teach. The instructor turned and walked away, leaving Una alone with her tormentors. That night, Una sat in her small room and held the sword across her knees. She ran her fingers along the flat of the blade, feeling the tiny imperfections in the steel. 400 years of history lived in this metal. 400 years of blood and tears and stubborn survival. Her grandmother had told her stories about the sword. She said it was special. She said it remembered things. She said that when danger came, the blade would know what to do, even if the person holding it did not. Una had never fully believed these stories. She was a modern woman. She understood science. She knew that a sword was just metal and nothing more. But she also knew that her grandmother had never lied to her. Not once in 22 years. Una sheathed the blade and set it beside her bed. Tomorrow she would show everyone what 400 years of history could do. Tomorrow she would make her ancestors proud. She closed her eyes and dreamed of steel and starlight. The transport ship shook hard as it entered the atmosphere of Kepler-7. Inside, 40 cadets sat strapped to their seats, checking their weapons and trying to hide their fear. The ship rattled and groaned. Red warning lights flashed on the walls. It felt like riding inside a metal box that was falling from the sky, because that was exactly what they were doing. Kepler-7 was a jungle moon, covered in thick green forests and filled with dangerous life. The Academy used it for survival training every year. Cadets were dropped into the wilderness and told to survive for 72 hours. They had to reach an extraction point on the other side of the jungle. They had to work in teams. They had to stay alive. What they were not told was that this year was different. This year, the Academy had released something into the jungle. Special creatures made in laboratories designed to hunt and kill. These monsters were meant to test the cadets in ways that normal training could not. Una sat alone at the back of the transport. No one had asked her to join their team. After what happened in the hangar, she was alone. The other cadets looked at her with pity or amusement, but none of them wanted to be seen with the crazy Earth Girl and her ancient sword. She did not mind. She had always been alone. She knew how to survive that way. Bradley sat at the front with his team. He had picked the best cadets, the ones with the newest weapons and the richest families. They would stick together, use their fancy equipment, and walk through this exercise like it was a vacation. At least, that was the plan. 30 seconds to drop, the pilot announced over the speakers. His voice was calm, but Una could hear the tension underneath. Even the pilot was nervous about Kepler-7. Bradley turned in his seat and looked back at Una. He smiled that cruel smile she was starting to know well. "Hey, Sword Girl," he shouted over the noise of the engines. "Try not to get eaten in the first hour. I would hate to miss seeing that antique melt in alien stomach acid." His team laughed. The sound was swallowed by the roar of the ship. Una did not respond. She just closed her eyes and put her hand on the handle of her sword. The metal was warm, like it always was. Like it had a heartbeat of its own. The bay doors opened with a terrible screech. Green light flooded into the cabin. Wind screamed through the opening, hot and wet and smelling of plants and dirt. Below them, the jungle waited like a hungry mouth. One by one, the cadets jumped. They wore special suits that would slow their fall and protect them when they hit the ground. Each person dropped into the green darkness and disappeared. Una was last. She stood at the edge of the bay door and looked down at the endless forest. Somewhere down there, things were waiting to kill her. Somewhere down there, she would have to prove that she belonged here. She drew her sword, not from fear, not for protection. This was something her grandmother had taught her. Before any battle, before any challenge, you drew the blade and let it see where you were going. You showed the sword what you were about to face. You asked for its help. The steel caught the light of the system's twin suns. For just a moment, the blade seemed to glow with a soft silver light. It was probably just a trick of the atmosphere, just sunlight reflecting off metal. But it looked like magic. It looked like a promise. Una jumped. The fall was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Wind tore at her body. The jungle rushed up to meet her. She could see rivers cutting through the green. She could see mountains in the distance. She could see flocks of alien birds scattering from the noise of her descent. Her suit activated at the last moment, slowing her down just enough to land without breaking every bone in her body. She hit the ground in a crouch, her boots sinking into soft, wet soil. The jungle closed around her immediately, blocking out the sky. It was hot. So hot that sweat started running down her face within seconds. The air was thick and hard to breathe. Strange sounds came from every direction. Clicks and screams and rustling that could have been wind or could have been something hunting. Una sheathed her sword and checked her equipment. She had a basic survival pack, water purification tablets, emergency rations for 3 days, and a small communicator. No plasma weapons. No force shields. Just the things that any person might carry, and the blade. Always the blade. She started walking. The extraction point was 40 miles north. 72 hours was plenty of time, as long as nothing went wrong. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the first scream. It was high and sharp, filled with terror. A human scream, cutting through the jungle noise like a knife. Then it stopped suddenly, which was somehow worse than if it had continued. Una froze. Her hand found the handle of her sword without thinking. More screams followed. Different voices, different directions. The cadets were spreading out through the jungle, and something was picking them off. Something fast. Something deadly. Her communicator crackled to life. Voices flooded through, overlapping and panicked. Contact. Contact. Something is, can't see it. The scanner shows nothing. Plasma isn't working. Repeat. Plasma is not effective. Oh God, oh God. It's coming through the... Then silence. One by one, the voices went quiet. Una stood alone in the green darkness, listening to the sounds of her classmates dying. She should have been scared. She should have run. Any normal person would have. But Una was not normal. She was the daughter of warriors, the granddaughter of survivors, the heir to 400 years of stubborn refusal to give up. Her ancestors had faced swords and guns and bombs in occupation. They had survived everything the world threw at them. She would survive this too. She drew her sword and moved deeper into the jungle. Something was hunting the cadets. Something that their fancy weapons could not stop. Maybe it was time to try something older. The steel whispered against the leather as it came free. In the green shadows of an alien world, 400 years of Earth history began to hum back. Night came fast on Kepler 7. One moment the twin suns were painting the sky orange and red. The next moment, darkness fell like a heavy blanket. The jungle became a black maze filled with sounds that made Bradley's blood run cold. His team had started with 8 people. Now there were 5. They had lost 3 cadets in the first 6 hours. Sarah went first, pulled into the trees so fast that nobody even saw what took her. James went next, screaming for help while something dragged him through the undergrowth. Then Rebecca, who had stopped to check her scanner and simply vanished. When they looked away for 2 seconds, Bradley had never been so scared in his life. His hand shook so badly that he could barely hold his plasma pistol. The weapon that he had been so proud of now felt useless. They had fired at the creatures dozens of times. The plasma bolts just bounced off like water hitting a rock. "What are these things?" whispered Jessica Powell. Her face was pale and wet with sweat. She kept looking up at the trees, waiting for death to drop down. "I don't know," Bradley admitted. It hurt to say those words. He was supposed to know everything. He was supposed to lead. They're not in any database. The scanners can't find them. Thermal shows nothing. Motion sensors show nothing. It's like they don't exist. "They exist," said another cadet, a young man named David. His voice was bitter and tired. "We've seen what they leave behind." Nobody answered. They had all seen the blood. They had all seen the torn pieces of uniforms scattered across the jungle floor. These creatures did not just kill. They destroyed. The group moved slowly through the darkness, staying close together, jumping at every sound. Bradley's expensive scanner beeped and flickered, showing nothing useful. All that money, all that technology, and it could not find something that was hunting them like animals. Then they heard it. A sound like bones cracking. A sound like metal being twisted. It came from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. "Get ready," Bradley said, raising his weapon. His voice cracked on the words. The creature dropped from the canopy dot. It was the most horrible thing Bradley had ever seen. 6 limbs, each ending in claws that looked sharper than any blade. An outer shell that shimmered and changed color, hiding the monster in plain sight. And a mouth that opened in 4 directions at once, showing rows of teeth that could tear through steel. The creature was as big as a car. It moved like liquid, flowing across the jungle floor with terrible speed. Bradley fired. The plasma bolt hit the creature's shell and splashed apart like a water balloon hitting a wall. He fired again. Again. Nothing happened. The monster did not even slow down. "Run!" He screamed. The team scattered in every direction. This was the worst thing they could do. Bradley knew. They should have stayed together. They should have fought as a unit. But fear took over, and fear made them stupid. Bradley ran blindly through the jungle. Branches tore at his suit and scratched his face. Roots tried to trip him. Vines grabbed at his arms. The sounds of screaming came from behind him, but he did not stop. He could not stop. He burst into a clearing and froze. Una stood there. The crazy Earth girl with the ancient sword. She looked calm, almost peaceful, like she was taking a walk in a park instead of standing in a jungle full of monsters. The blade was in her hands, held in a 2-handed grip that looked practiced and sure. Behind her, 3 of the creatures lay dead. Bradley could not believe what he was seeing. The monsters that laughed at plasma fire, the nightmares with shells harder than anything he had ever encountered. They lay on the ground with their bodies cut open. Their insides spilled out onto the wet earth. They were very clearly, very completely dead. How? Bradley gasped. He could barely breathe from running. How is that possible? Una did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the tree line, watching for more threats. "The blade is made of tamahagane," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "It is folded steel. heated and hammered thousands of times by a master smith. My ancestors learned that some materials, when crafted with patience and intention, find a strength that science cannot explain. That's insane, Bradley said. That's just metal. It's 400 years old. It should break against those shells. And yet, Una said simply, pointing at the dead creatures with her chin. A fourth monster emerged from the darkness. Thought it was bigger than the others. Older, maybe. Smarter, definitely. It moved slowly, studying Una with something that looked like caution. Perhaps it had seen what happened to its brothers. Perhaps it knew that this small human was different. Bradley raised his pistol, then lowered it again. What was the point? Una moved Dot. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Bradley had ever witnessed. She did not run at the creature. She flowed toward it, like water sliding over rocks. The monster struck with one massive claw, fast enough to slice through metal. Una was not there. She had already moved, already slipped past the attack, already swung her blade. The sword sang as it cut through the air. The edge found a joint in the creature's armor, a tiny gap between the plates. The blade went through like it was cutting paper. The creature screamed. Thick blue blood sprayed across the clearing. It swung again, wild with pain. Una ducked under the attack and cut again. Another joint. Another spray of blood. Two more cuts. The monster fell. The whole fight had taken maybe 10 seconds. Una stood over the dead creature, breathing hard but steady. Her face showed no pride, no excitement. Just focus. Just duty. Bradley looked down at his own chest and felt his blood go cold. There was a cut across his suit, a thin line that went through the outer armor layer. He had not felt it happen. He had not seen her do it. When did you? He started. When I moved to kill the creature, Una said. A warning. A demonstration. Your weapons are useless here. Your money means nothing. Your family name will not save you. She turned to face him for the first time. But I will, if you let me. Bradley Mitchell had never felt so small in his entire life. He had never been so afraid, so humbled, so completely wrong about everything. More sounds in the trees. More creatures coming. What do we do? He asked. His voice was small, like a child asking for help. Stay behind me, Una said. She raised her ancient blade, and the steel caught the light of the moons rising over the jungle. Stay quiet. And stay close. For the first time in his life, Bradley Mitchell did exactly what he was told. The night stretched on like a bad dream that would not end. Una led Bradley through the jungle, moving carefully and slowly. Every step was measured. Every sound was noted. She treated the forest like an enemy that demanded respect. Bradley followed in silence. He had thrown away his plasma pistol hours ago. It was just dead weight now, a useless reminder of how wrong he had been about everything. They found other survivors as they moved. First Jessica hiding in a hollow tree and crying quietly. Then David, who had broken his leg falling down a hill and could barely walk. 2 more cadets joined them later, scared and lost and grateful to find someone who knew what they were doing. By midnight, Una was leading a group of 11 people. 11 survivors out of 40. 11 people who owed their lives to a girl they had laughed at just one day before. The creatures kept coming. They attacked from the trees, from the ground, from the shadows. Each time, Una met them with her blade. Each time, the ancient steel cut through their armor like it was nothing. Each time, the monsters fell. Bradley watched her fight and could not understand what he was seeing. The creatures had shells that stopped plasma bolts. They had armor that the best weapons in the galaxy could not scratch. But Una's sword, this old piece of metal from a primitive planet, went through them like a hot knife through butter. It was impossible. And yet it was happening right in front of his eyes. During a quiet moment, When the group was resting near a stream, Bradley worked up the courage to ask, "How does it work?" He said, "The sword. How can it cut through those things when nothing else can?" Una was cleaning the blade with a piece of cloth from her pocket. She did this after every fight, wiping away the blue blood and checking for damage. The sword was spotless. It always was. The Galactic Armaments Commission tested this blade when I joined the academy, she said. They wanted to know the same thing. They used every scanner, every test, every piece of equipment they had. What did they find? Nothing. Una held up the blade, letting moonlight play along the edge. Carbon dating confirmed its age. 412 years old. Molecular analysis showed nothing special. Iron, carbon, and trace elements. The same materials you would find in any piece of steel. Bradley shook his head. That doesn't make sense. There has to be something different about it. The scientists said the same thing. They ran more tests. They tried to copy the blade using the most advanced methods available. Nothing they made could do what this sword does. Una sheathed the blade gently, like she was putting a baby to bed. Eventually, they gave up trying to explain it. Some things do not fit into their equations. But you know why it works, Bradley said. It was not a question. Don't you? Una was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft and distant, like she was telling a story from a dream. My grandmother told me many things about this sword. She said it was made by a man named Master Young in a small village in Korea, back when Earth still had countries. He spent 3 years forging this single blade. Every day, he heated the metal and folded it, hammered it, and shaped it. Every day, he poured his heart into the work. That's just blacksmithing, Bradley said. That's just craft. No, Una said firmly. It was more than that. Master Young was not just making a weapon. He was creating a promise. A promise to protect his family, his village, his people. He was putting everything he believed into the steel. She touched the handle of the sword, running her fingers over the worn grip. My grandmother said that intention has weight. She said that when you pour enough meaning into something, it becomes more than what it was. The sword is not special because of its materials. It is special because of what it carries. 400 years of history. 8 generations of warriors. The hopes and fears and stubborn will of every person who has held it. Bradley wanted to argue. He wanted to say that this was superstition, fairy tales, primitive nonsense. But he had seen the creatures fall. He had seen the impossible happen right in front of him. Technology forgets what it's for, Una continued. A plasma pistol does not care who holds it or why. It is just a tool, designed to do a job. But this blade, she smiled, the first smile Bradley had ever seen on her face. This blade remembers. It knows why it exists. Not to destroy, but to protect. Not to conquer, but to preserve. A scream split the air somewhere in the distance. Another cadet, probably, meeting a bad end. The survivors in the group tensed up, ready to run. But Una just stood and drew her sword again. The steel whispered as it came free from the sheath. We keep moving, she said. The extraction point is still 20 miles away. Stay close, stay quiet, and stay behind me. What if there are more of those things? David asked. His leg was wrapped in bandages now, and he leaned on Jessica for support. Una looked at him with calm, steady eyes. There will be more, she said. There will always be more. But we will make it through. My sword has never failed my family. It will not fail now. She walked into the darkness, and 11 frightened people followed the girl with the ancient blade. They had no other choice. Their fancy weapons were useless. Their training had not prepared them for this. All they had was Una. All they had was 400 years of stubborn human history. Forged into steel and carried by a woman who believed it would be enough. The jungle watched them go. The creatures circled in the shadows, waiting for their chance. The blade waited too, hungry and ready. The night was far from over. Dawn came slowly over Kepler 7. The twin suns climbed above the horizon and painted the jungle in shades of gold and red. Birds began to sing. The heavy darkness that had pressed down on everything lifted away like a bad memory. Yuna and her group stumbled out of the tree, lying just as the light touched their faces. The extraction point was ahead, a flat clearing with a landing pad and a single transport ship waiting to take them home. They had made it. Against all odds, against creatures that nothing could stop, they had survived. 12 people walked out of that jungle. Yuna had found one more survivor during the final push, a young woman named Emma, who had hidden in a cave for most of the night. 12 out of 40. Less than a third of the cadets who had dropped in. Yuna's sword had tasted the blood of 17 creatures during that long night. 17 nightmares that even the Academy's most advanced weapons could not scratch. The blade had cut through them all. Instructor Park Do-yeon stood at the landing pad, watching them approach. His face was hard to read. He looked at the ragged survivors, at their torn uniforms and exhausted faces. Then his eyes moved to Yuna, to the sword still in her hand. Something changed in his expression. Something old and painful moved behind his eyes. "Cadet Kim," he called out. "A word, please." The others filed past, climbing into the transport ship. Bradley hesitated at the bottom of the ramp. He looked at Yuna for a long moment, then bowed his head slightly. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. An apology. A thank you. An admission that he had been wrong. Yuna returned the bow with a tiny nod of her own. Then Bradley was gone, and Yuna was alone with the instructor. Park led her away from the ship, toward the edge of the clearing where the jungle met the open ground. They stood there in silence for a while, looking out at the green sea of trees that had almost killed them all. "That blade," Park said finally. "I know it." Yuna's eyes widened. "Sir?" "I served in the First Contact War," Park said. His voice was distant, heavy with memories. 50 years ago, when humanity first met the Dominion. You've read about it in your history classes, I'm sure. What the books don't tell you is how bad it really was. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The Dominion had armor that nothing could penetrate. We threw everything at them. Nuclear weapons, plasma cannons, antimatter bombs. Nothing worked. They walked through our best defenses like they were made of paper. We were losing, badly. Yuna stayed silent, listening. "There was a woman in my unit," Park continued. "A soldier from Earth, from a small country called Korea. She carried a sword just like yours. The same curve, the same worn handle, the same ancient blade. Everyone laughed at her, just like they laughed at you." "My great-great-grandmother," Yuna whispered. "Kim Sojin." Park nodded slowly. "Sojin. Yes, that was her name. I had forgotten it until just now." He turned to look at Yuna with tired, wondering eyes. "She saved my life. We were trapped in a Dominion ship, surrounded by their warriors. Our weapons were useless. We were going to die. What happened? She drew that sword and walked into them." Park's voice cracked slightly. "She cut through their armor like it was cloth. She killed 7 Dominion warriors in less than a minute. 7, with a blade forged before humanity ever left Earth." He shook his head, still amazed after all these years. "We have spent 50 years trying to understand how that was possible. We've tested every material, tried every method, used every technology available. We've made copies of that blade using the most advanced forging techniques in the galaxy." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "None of them work. None of them can do what that piece of old Earth steel can do. Why? Yuna asked. She had asked herself this question many times. I used to think it was the materials, Park said. Some special mineral, some forgotten technique. But I've come to believe something different over the years. Something that makes no scientific sense at all. He turned to face her fully. Humanity does not survive in this galaxy because we are stronger or faster or smarter than other species. We are none of those things. We survive because we carry our past forward. Because we remember. Because we refuse to let go of what makes us who we are. He pointed at the sword. That blade works because it matters. Because 8 generations of your family have believed in it, fought with it, died for it. That belief, that intention, that stubborn human will, it sank into the steel like water into soil. The blade became more than metal. It became a promise. Yuna looked down at the sword in her hand. 400 years old. Carried across oceans and continents, and eventually to the stars. It had seen wars that history had forgotten. It had protected people whose names were lost to time. And still it worked. Still it cut when nothing else could. What do I do now? She asked. Park smiled for the first time. It made him look younger, less tired. Now you teach, he said. You teach the other cadets what you showed them last night. Not sword fighting, though that has its place. You teach them what it means to carry something that matters. You teach them that humanity's greatest weapon is not plasma or nuclear fire. It is our refusal to forget where we came from. He put a hand on her shoulder. Earth was never conquered, Cadet Kim. Not really. Do you know why? Because we carry things that cannot be killed. Traditions, beliefs, 400-year-old swords. That should not work but do anyway. We are stubborn, we humans. We hold on to our past even when the whole galaxy tells us to let go. He stepped back and saluted her. A full military salute, the kind given to commanding officers and war heroes. Your great-grandmother saved my life. You saved 12 lives last night. The blade chose well, both times. Yuna returned the salute, standing straight and proud. Behind her, the transport ship's engines began to warm up. The other survivors were waiting. A new day was beginning, and with it, a new chapter in her life. She sheathed the sword one final time and walked toward the ship. Bradley met her at the ramp. He did not laugh at her anymore. His eyes held something new. Respect, maybe. Or gratitude. Or fear. Thank you, he said quietly. For saving us. For everything. Yuna nodded. Next time, she said, bring a better weapon. She walked up the ramp and took her seat among the survivors. The ship lifted off, rising through the atmosphere and into the black ocean of space. Below them, the jungle shrank to a green smear, then disappeared entirely. Yuna looked out the window at the stars. So many stars. So many worlds. So many battles yet to be fought. Her hand rested on the sword at her hip. The metal was warm, like it always was. Like a heartbeat. Like a promise. 400 years of history. 8 generations of warriors. One small woman from Earth. The galaxy had no idea what was coming.